Good afternoon, and welcome to the monthly webcast of MinistryCOM. Sorry, I'm Anita Berry, and joining me today is Terrell Sanders, who's the Executive Director for MinistryCOM, and also Eric Granada, who's the Senior Graphic Designer at Henderson Hills. And today, you guys are going to talk about principles for effective communications, right? And I also want to remind the audience that we're going to have some Q&A time at the end of this session after they give their discussion, and you all can use the chat window to put in your questions, or you can also go to info@ministrycom.org, and after the presentation we'll take a few minutes to try and answer your questions. So feel free to go ahead and post those during the presentation if you like. Tara, let's start with you. And you said you have 7 principles for effective communications. How did you come up with those?
Well, these have been stolen from the best. MinistryCOM is about 6 years old now. This will be our 6th year. And so we work with a lot of churches, heard a lot of good presentations, and met a lot of good churches. And so I've tried to synthesize, what I found were 7 of the best principles that effective churches using to communicate. And so these are stolen from the best. I don't know if anybody really uses all of them, but there's some good stuff here. And Eric's here to kind of keep an eye on me. Most of you know I play a church communication person on TV, but I don't really do it as my day job. Eric does this as his day job, so he has to practice a lot of what we preach here. But we'll go ahead and look at the slides here. The first one here, my first point is what we call one church, one brand, one logo. And I apologize to people out there in TV land. Our scaler pushes these graphics and makes them very, very rich. So the colors are a little bit brighter on the webcast maybe than we're seeing them here. But we work with so many churches that when you look at their church bulletin, it's just covered with logos. And so the feeling here that is if your brochure or your bulletin or your website looks like a NASCAR car, that's a bad thing. We don't want to brand every ministry individually. We want to brand the church. And then inside the church, you've got different departments, you've got different ministries, and they all have sub-brands. But the brand is the whole church, and we want to communicate the churches as one unit. If you think about in the commercial businesses, if you go to Walmart, they have a shoe department. But they don't label the shoe department as a separate store. The employees don't consider themselves to be a separate company. They're just one department inside Walmart. And if you took Walmart apart by department, each one had their own name and their own brand and their own marketing, they wouldn't have the value they have as being this big one-stop shop. But we see churches so often want to brand each ministry. And then when the public sees it, they may see the women's ministry and not realize it's part of the whole church. And so it's important to do the communications well, that you have one logo for the whole church. That logo is used everywhere. You have one brand is used everywhere. And the ministries become part of the main logo, part of the main brand, but they don't have their own identity. I may not explain that quite as well. Eric probably has experienced more of this. How do you fight it out at Henderson?
Well, the way we fight it out is a lot of ministries want to individualize themselves and think that if they come up with this cool logo and this cool individualizing brand, that's going to be of benefit to the ministry, when really what they need to be concerned about overall is the benefit that it's going to have to the people coming. Is their name or their logo going to communicate effectively to the people who need their services, and is it going to serve the church? If it's branded completely differently, someone might think that it's a separate ministry altogether.
Right. And like I said, we see an awful lot of churches that ministries each brand themselves individually, and the intentions are honorable, the intentions are good, but what happens to the community is the community never sees the church as a whole. They just see these little fragments here and there, and never really see the impact the whole church makes, as a whole in the community. People out there, feel free to post questions as we go through these. We'll take some questions here after we go through the points. The next one is new members are young. And a lot of decision makers, in fact, most of the decision makers in the staff are middle-aged and older people. And so, I have my preferences of what kind of music I like, what kind of sermons I like, what kind of topics I like. But church growth comes from young families. And so when you're working with visitors, working with new members, working with people becoming into your church, you've got to remember they're young, and they're going to have different attitudes than the people that often are doing the planning and making the decisions themselves. And I use this slide here of this girl, this great stock photo here. But she's got a tattoo on her wrist. She's got some kind of a piercing thing here. Her hair's multiple different colors. She's young enough to be my daughter. She and I have very little in common. So if I program the church, and I program the communications, I program the marketing, the stuff I like, it's not going to appeal to her. And more than likely, stuff that she does like, I'm going to go, ooh, I'm not real fond of that myself. But church growth is going to come from her generation, not from mine. And so we have to remember, as we get older and wiser, that we have to market more toward these young people. I don't know of any denominations or any geographic areas that have church growth coming out of any demographic except young, college students, young families. There's one church I met in Arizona that works with retired people, and they grow through retired people, but the only church I've met in 6 years that really brings in a stream of new members that are, over 25, 30 years old. Did you have any comments on that? Or
my only thought is, if church growth comes out of the younger generation, then that seems to me like a very good reason to consider communicating through avenues like Facebook or Twitter or SMS, because that's where they're congregating already.
Right. Yeah, and that's what, as we make the planning decisions and the communication decisions, we've got to look at them from, how would this generation, how would these 20-somethings, 30-somethings meet us, find out about us, talk about us, not how our senior pastor who's 60 or 70, would react to that. And the fact that, some of us old guys are like, well, I wouldn't go to Facebook. I wouldn't do that. Well, you're not the target. The new members are going to be young, and so we have to structure our communications, particularly our outreach communications, our visitor communications, and target that toward younger people. And that's, again, it can be a struggle when you're trying to get things past staff, and the average age of the staff is often quite a bit older than your typical new member. Next one here, and this is a huge political thing we talk about every year at MinistryCOM, but I'll give you this as a fact, and you can quote me when you go to your staff meeting. All ministry events are not equal. If you do a vacation Bible school that brings in 5,000 children, that should get more promotion and more budget and more pulpit time than the men's chess club that meets on Thursdays and has 3 guys in it and never brings in visitors, never goes outside their room. They just come in every day. And we see over and over again these ministries saying, well, if VBS got a banner, if VBS got pulpit announcements, if VBS did that, then why can't my men's chess club have all that too? And it's like, well, when you bring in 5,000 visitors into church, then we'll start promoting your chess club, a whole lot better. And there's a feeling in ministry, particularly, there's this democracy feeling, is that, it's fair, it's Christian, it's nice, we should treat everybody the same. If we give women's ministry, a banner in the hallway, we have to give one to every other ministry. If we make a pulpit announcement about Vacation Bible School, we should make one about every other ministry. And that's just not true. The ministries are not equal. I mean, typically we look at it from the point of view of how many people they reach, and are they reaching target audiences? I mean, if they're reaching visitors, if they're reaching people to bring in, those ministries get more budget, they get more promotion, they get more exposure. Ministries are maintenance ministries, they're behind-the-scenes ministries. The men in the chess club have been playing the chess club for 60 years. They know that meeting's next Thursday. They don't need, pulpit announcements about that. But if your church is really trying to reach young families, and you've got women's ministry, you've got Vacation Bible School, you've got children's ministries, those are ones where you can spend money in the market, you can spend money in the community and reach people. And we have to just kind of make a principle here and just tell the staff and the volunteers, all ministries are not equal. I'm sorry. And the church is going to prioritize these ministries as a higher priority than other ministries. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that, priority-wise and resource-wise, we have to spend our resources here. And I know people talk to me all the time about, we've got to announce with the bulletin. People want to put announcements with the bulletin, and our bulletin would be 40 pages long if we did all of them. How do you say no? And what I hope from these points here is that we can take some of these points back to leadership and get leadership to endorse these. So it's not the bad comm person that's saying, no, you can't be the bulletin. It's a known policy that, any church event with less than 200 attendance is not going to make the marquee. And it's not personal. That's just the way it is. But this is I'm amazed still how many churches struggle with the idea that we can't say no to any ministry regardless of their size. If VBS gets a big website posting, then everybody else should too. Do you have any experience or fights with that?
Yeah, we have experience with that a lot. And, we have so many ways to communicate events and that type of thing that if we have to say no, we can usually offer them an alternative. Like, I'm sorry we couldn't get you in the bulletin this week, but let's put a PowerPoint slide up for you. Or, we couldn't send you out in the SMS blast, but we could do a blog post or create a Facebook event or something. So there's so many different ways to communicate.
Yeah.
That usually you can offer an alternative and make them happy.
Yeah.
And it might even be something they hadn't even thought of.
Well, and that brings up a good point too, because with a lot of the new media, you don't have the hard print costs. I mean, putting a blog post doesn't cost as much as sending a postcard to everybody in 13 zip codes. So while you may have a direct mail budget for an event, a major event, your secondary events, they can still have Facebook events. They can still have email invites. They can still have SMS messages that don't take pulpit time, don't take brochure time or announcement time. They don't take a lot of hard dollars. And I do think we have a lot more tools than we had just even a few years ago, where you pretty much got in the bulletin, you got the pulpit announcements, or you got in the sign, or you didn't. It's real hard to tell all those ministries that didn't ever make it to the sign, when's my turn? Next point, and this should be obvious, but again, guests come first. And as we're doing communications, as we're doing marketing, as we're doing any kind of promotion, we've got to write for guests. Our members know about these things. Most of the people that are using our communication, or that are most people that are depending on this the most, are guests. The two things churches do real bad, they do churchese. I've seen announcements that's like, MOPS meets in the NPR after Koinonia. It's like, I'm a visitor here. I have no idea what that meant. Well, MOPS is Mothers of Preschoolers. We all know that. The NPR is multipurpose room, the gym. And Koinonia is the Wednesday night service. So everybody that's a member knows that Mothers of Preschoolers meets in the gym after Wednesday night services. But a visitor sees that and they're lost. And I've even seen announcements, because I've visited a lot of churches with MinistryCOM. They'll just mention a room and they'll say, it's in Henderson. And it's like, what room is that? Give me, as a guest, I need a room number, or the gym or the high school room. But if you just mention rooms by their name with no maps or no directions, as a visitor, it's hard for me to figure out where those rooms are. But we try and communicate to guests, and we try, and whenever there's a decision between working with guests or working with members, we want to lean toward the guests and tell the members, you know where to find the rest of this stuff. If we can't please everybody, we want to please the guests first, because they don't have a lot of other options. Those of us that have been there for 20 years, we can call the church office. We know the ministry leader. We can call them at home and say, what's going on? But our first line communications is targeted to guests, and to trying to make things as easy for guests to understand as possible, and not always talking to our target. Well, typically our target audience is ourselves and our own friends.
I think that sums it up well.
You fought that out already. Yeah. Eric's got all the scars. I teach theory. Eric's got scars. He's fought these things out in the real world here. The next one is one of my pet topics, because we build websites, and in my day job we build websites. But people come to me all the time in church like, okay, well, what do we put in the website? What do we not put in the website? As we're generating flyers, announcements, and bulletins, and notices, and enrollment, what should go on the website? And I think if you look at the web in the commercial world, the answer is everything goes on the web unless there's reason not to. As you're generating all your marketing materials, my argument would be your audience out there, especially your guests, your young people that live on the internet, they expect everything that they see. If it's taped to the wall, if it's passed out in class, if it's in the bulletin, they expect that copy of that to be on the website. And if they don't pick up a brochure in class or in worship, they assume it's on the website, because in the commercial world, that's the way it works. The website is the library of the world. And that's where the web started. I mean, the original purpose of the web was to be this big document library, and everything got stuck on there, and you could always go look stuff up. And so rather than trying to prioritize what goes on the web, my argument would be put everything on the web. If you print it, then create a PDF and throw it on the web. And the only web decision is what doesn't go on the web, because there are some things. There are privacy issues. There's data that has personal phone numbers and children's ministry things that need to be kept secure. But for the most part, any brochure, any flyer, any announcement you're making in class, live on stage, in a bulletin, in a handout, copies of that should all be on the website. Because especially as back to our target audience, our young girl with the tattoo and the piercing, all kind of stuff, she's going to assume that she can go to the website after church and look this stuff up. She's not going to think that she has to take that sheet home and fill that sheet out to sign up for the retreat. She's going to assume that form's online. And when it's not online, she's going to really kind of wonder. Back to that guest come first. I got to come back to the building to get a sign-up form for an event. I mean, come on. Why can't I sign up online? So we really try and push everybody to put everything on the web. As you do your communications and you look at what goes on the line, my argument is, all the forms you're creating on your weekly basis, you should have a way of throwing those on the web, and the decision should be, is there anything here that shouldn't be public, rather than looking at them and saying, oh, maybe we should put the enrollment form on the website because we're doing public sign-ups.
We've, at Henderson Hills, we've run into the situation where I think we're pretty good about putting everything on the web, but we've been doing this for a few years, and so if you search for the kids camp at our website, you're going to get results for Kids Camp 2010
every year,
all the way back to like 2006. And so one thing I would caution people to do is keep track of your older posts, and either depending on how your CMS works, whether that be WordPress or Sky CMS, develop a best practice for handling old content, whether that be redirecting it to the new content or deleting. Just keep that in mind, that someone could search and end up on an old page too.
That's good. Yeah, most people that I'm working with are getting the website launched for the first time, so we're kind of starting from zero, and we don't have to worry about the past. But you're right. You could end up with a large pile of information after several years, and can be very confusing. The next one's what I call squeeze trees, and Eric can talk. He can tell you some horror stories, but the concept here is we're trying to reduce printing. We're trying to reduce printing and paper, and I don't recommend that you eliminate paper. People tried it, but it's really hard to eliminate print. But we've worked with a lot of churches that used to do a 16-page weekly announcement sheet that can get it down to 4 pages or 8 pages. We've got people that used to do brochures that can now get them down to a flyer. People used to do flyers, now get them down to a postcard. It used to be a postcard, can now be an email. And so we're just trying to squeeze these paper, these hard costs. And I'm not doing this so much for the environmental green side of it. It's more for the cost and the efficiency. But it's easier and cheaper to send out 500 emails than send out 500 letters. And as we all know in printing, you print a whole lot of them, you still run out, and then when the building clears out, you've got 40% of your printing is still sitting in the pews, didn't get taken home anyway. So it's not a real efficient use of your money or your time. And then throw in the whole environment business, and just printing large publications is just not a good thing. We've pushed for a number of years the idea of squeezing your print publications, and then the magic words are always details on the website. So in the past, you may have had a 5 or 6 page brochure for a major retreat. Now it can be a 1-page brochure. The details are on the website, so the brochure becomes a teaser, has enough information to get their attention. But then all the details and all the notes and all the fine details are on the website. So people that want it can get it, but the people that just take the flyer, look at it, and throw it in the trash can on the way out, you're not wasting a lot of ink and printing and time on all those people. And it just goes all the way down the line. And I know you've tried to your boss tried to turn the bulletin off once, and with less than excellent results, I think would be the way you'd say it politely.
Sure. One thing we did over the last year, though, which it came to us and it was kind of a no-brainer, was we converted or reformatted our bulletin from a custom paper size to a standard paper size. We were using a non-standard paper size, which meant that we had to have parent sheets cut down, which was expensive. And so we had this cool, kind of custom-looking bulletin, but by going to a more standard paper size, a legal paper size, we've had, in addition to saving about $6,000 a year on paper costs, we're getting a a lot better results from our in-house copiers because we print them in-house. And it's just been great. And that's low-hanging fruit. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Spend a few minutes scooting stuff around and save some dollars.
I've just been amazed at the people I've talked to, how many very small churches, churches under a few hundred people, that put out, weekly or monthly newsletters. We're not talking about a bulletin like a sheet. We're talking about a little mini magazine and, newsletters that are 10, 12 pages wide. They produce every week. You've got in-house staff that's producing those things. They're typesetting them or formatting them. They're printing them, for a very small circulation. And then next week do it all over again. And, we talk to those people. It's like, oh, we can't afford a website. It's like, well, let me cut your printing bill in half. You can put a really nice website for half what you're spending on printing this magazine every week. And again, if we're looking at our audience being young and being visitors, then they wouldn't mind getting a lot of that as email via website. Now, maybe your seniors and your middle-aged people are like, well, I like the printed version. Well, what we've done in several churches is we've gone to the membership and said, if you ask them, would you rather have email than print? A lot of people over 40, and we'll draw the line at 40 because that seems to be the people that grew up with the internet. People over 40, no, I like print. But if you tell that same group of people, we spend $36,000 a year on printing. If we can save half of that and put that in ministry, would you take your newsletter in email instead? The vast majority of them will say, oh, well, yeah. Given my choice personally between email and a print, I'd rather have print. But when I think about, putting $15,000 toward ministry with no effort, you can email me a newsletter. And so we've learned if you do polls, make sure that the membership understands how much money is how much time and salary costs. It's hard to look at the soft costs, but it takes a lot of labor costs to put together all these handouts. And if the time isn't spent doing that, they can be spent doing a lot of other promotion. And so a lot of times the membership has no idea how much money goes into it's in the budget every year. We've always spent that much money. The money's in the budget. We don't think about it. But if you show people this is how much money we're spending on printing things and handing them to you, that we could be emailing to you, we could be moving to the website, we could be putting them on Facebook. There's lots of no transaction cost ways of disseminating this information, and then the bulletin becomes one sheet or two sheets, ideally in a format that can be produced cheaply. Then that's a win for everybody. We've used that technique with a lot of churches to sell websites to explain that you can't afford a website. If you're spending $20,000 or $30,000 a year on printing, you can afford a website and do a better job at communicating and save money. My last point here, I love this guy. One media does not fit all. I remember, this is how old I am. I remember when fax machines kind of became mainstream. And we all had telephones. They actually had telegrams in those days. But when fax machines became mainstream, that was really cool stuff. And the question was, well, are overnight couriers going to go out of business since we have fax machines now? Are we not going to need couriers anymore? And no, overnight couriers didn't go away. And then when email came out, it was like, oh, okay, well, fax machine's going to go away because we have email now. Well, no, that didn't really go away either. And as each new media comes out, we think, okay, well, now that we have an email newsletter, we can quit printing our print newsletter. It doesn't work that way. Modern internet companies still do direct mail advertising. They still do print. They still print brochures. One media doesn't fit everyone, especially in a church where you typically have a fairly large group of demographics there. You've got a wide age range. We try, but we just can't find one tool that's going to communicate to everybody. Some people still want print. They still want the brochure. They still want the sheet in their hands they can read. Other people are only going to catch it on Facebook, only can catch it on the website. They don't want to waste paper. Other people are text messaging people. My generation caught on to email, and man, I like email. But both of my kids, college, high school, actually both in college now, they're in the text message generation. They think email's old-fashioned. It's like, how can email be old-fashioned? But they're texting, and My daughter told me once when she was in college, she said, we only email to our parents and our professors. We Facebook and we text message our friends, but there's even a generation gap between email and text messaging. And so the goal of saying, okay, well, let's just put everything on Facebook and then just get rid of our printing, get rid of our email, get rid of everything else, it doesn't work that way. You have to do everything. We do find that the electronic medias scale better, they're cheaper. So if we can squeeze our paper, we can squeeze our other communications. We do less direct mail, we do tighter direct mail. Everything refers back to the website. I just saw, I don't have the stat with me, I should look it up. The fastest growing demographic on Facebook right now is like over 60. Did you see the stat on that?
I've heard that.
Yeah, I mean, just like in the last year, the fastest growing demographic on Facebook is people over 60. So all those old people, old is older than me. My demographic for old is older than me. But these old people are getting on Facebook now. And so there's hope for the world. I mean, we may eventually be able to get rid of paper after all. But today, one media doesn't fit everybody. And you have to make that same message out multiple different places. We've got some techniques to try and not to recreate the content. We can take the same content and just cut and paste it on Twitter, cut and paste it in the website, cut and paste it in the newsletter, cut and paste it in the announcements, and so we're not having to create 7 copies of everything. But if your goal, and this is particularly maybe designed, this is maybe leaning to some of the younger people out there. If your goal is to push all your church communications to the website and to Twitter, you better have a church that's totally under 25 years old, because it's not going to fly. That's my last point. We kind of blasted through those, but go ahead and.
If you want to go ahead and have some questions for Terrell and Eric, you can go ahead and send those. You can submit them to your chat box there on the screen, or email them to info@ministrycom.org, and we can go ahead and take some questions. And Terrell, I loved what you said about polling members of the church and letting them know the cost, because I knew we'd changed bulletins, but I had no idea it was. That's a significant $6,000 is a significant savings, and I'm in the over 40 crowd, and I prefer print. I still am pen and paper girl with my calendar. I don't do it on my phone, and so I prefer all that in hand. But if it were presented to me that way, we can, do more for more people. Then that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So I think sharing that information with the members that would be a crucial part of that.
Yeah, well, churches are known for we've always done it this way mentality in a lot of areas. And communications suffers from that, because communication changes so fast. And there's so many new things that you have to justify. And we have that attitude of, we've always done it this way. We've always had a newsletter. We've always done postcards to promote events. It's hard to make those changes. But particularly, if you're buying the concept of new members are young, if you're buying the concept of they're young and they're coming to us through technology and they're visitors, they don't understand all our resources here, then reaching them in their own language and their own mediums is a lot more important. Once you get them in the building, you've already, that's a whole different issue, but getting people in the building is the hard part. Got some comments here. Let's see. E-newsletters have been effective. What program do you guys use for e-news?
We use Constant Contact for our e-newsletter. We send it out every Thursday. Our open rate is somewhere between 25 and 30%.
That's very good.
And I think churches get better open rates than probably Walmart, but so we're pretty happy with it.
That's good.
And we've loved it. It's been great, and we've got good feedback. We send out an HTML version and a text only version, to appeal to people's preferences, and for our money, it's a great tool.
We used MailChimp in a lot of the sites that we do. There's MailChimp, there's Contact, and then I think Aweber is the other one, kind of the big three. MailChimp's a newer one. It's got some more bells and whistles. If you're a programmer, if you have programmers on staff and you want to really integrate, MailChimp's got some really cool features. From the user's point of view, Constant Contact and MailChimp are very similar. They're priced almost the same. I haven't used Aweber personally. They're both great products. We like MailChimp because we're programmers and we want to be able to integrate. But but it's pretty cool. All right, so we've got the argument is that this is for big churches. I get a lot of questions whenever we do MinistryCOM training. Is we always people come up to us and say, well, what about does this apply to little churches too? And the vast majority of what we do does apply to smaller churches. I mean, you may do it on a smaller scale, but the issues are still the same. I mean, if your church is trying to attract visitors, if your church is growing through young families, if your church is trying to communicate effectively and inexpensively, at least in hard dollars, these principles are all the same. And larger churches can roll out larger features, but especially with the web and with all the electronic technology, there's not a lot of hard costs to begin with. If you're talking about electronic signage out for the building that costs $55,000, that's for big churches. But little churches can do Facebook just at the same price as big churches. Little churches can do email newsletters. I mean, the email newsletter we use is free if you have less than 500 people on your mailing list. And then it's $20 a month for up to 5,000 people on your mailing list. So for $20 a month, you can have up to 5,000. If you're under 500 people on your mailing list, it's free. I mean, that should cover about every kind of church out there.
In regards to small churches, I would say that if it's going to be easier for you to make some of these changes as a smaller church than if you than after you're several hundred or 1,000 people big. So why not get these best practices in place now, but before it becomes a hindrance later. Trying to push it through committees and whatnot.
That's a good point.
All right, let's see.
Do you have another one? While you're looking up another question, I just want to remind everybody that you're hosting a MinistryCOM conference in October. It'll be October 20th through the 22nd in Dallas at Preston Trail Community Church. And that's in Frisco, Texas. And you can register online at ministrycom.org for that. You won't want to miss that.
Yes, thank you. Important to play it. Facebook questions. Who's using Facebook? Is Facebook effective? Yes. What I'm seeing as a professional web developer is there's a chance that the website will become the anchor that you point everything to, and a lot of your dynamic content will be on social media. I'm seeing a lot of sites now where in the old days we had discussion boards, we had photo albums on the website, and now we just throw them off to Facebook because Facebook does that so well, and people will connect with Facebook that won't connect with the church. I mean, if I'm not a member of your church, I'm a member of your church's website. If I'm a friend of yours, I'll see the pictures that you've tagged. And so Facebook is actually, I think, peeling a lot of dynamic content off of the church's website. The church's website becomes more of a big brochure and a big anchor that points to, here's our photos on Facebook, here's our profiles on Twitter, here's our RSS feed over here. And I don't know, the market moves so fast, it's hard to, I don't really want to predict that websites going to all go static. But at least in this market, I'm seeing an awful lot of dynamic content that used to be the fast-moving guts of the website is moving off to social media. What that means if you're a small church is you can get by with a really small website now. You can build a little 5 or 6 page static website and have a really good Facebook page and have the same functionality as a great big huge church that spent tens of thousands of dollars on the website, because all they're doing with that extra money on their website is creating tools that Facebook has for free. And I still think there's a barrier. I still think when it comes to friends and word of mouth, I would look at Eric's photos or Anita's photos before I go to their church's photos. I mean, this is a barrier there. Go to my church website and look at this. But if it's on your page or if you've commented on it on Facebook or on LinkedIn or something like that, I mean, I see that as part of your life, and I would get involved in your life as friends more than I would go to your church and see something. So for a lot of communications, it's getting past that barrier of, it's church.
I heard or read a blog post, I think it was at mediasalt.com. If it's not, I'm sorry, but Mediasalt's great anyway. And it was talking about the death of the microsite And a microsite is, just a small website that you might put together for a specific event. In the past, we've put together microsites for camps and that kind of thing. And the writer of this blog post was arguing that a Facebook event page or fan page can take the place of a microsite.
Yes.
And it would be beneficial for it to do so because it's got all the social networking sorts of features built right in. And everybody, and that's where everybody's congregating anyway. They're not all congregating at mymicrosite.com. They're all on Facebook. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Questions about privacy. Privacy and youth in regards to Facebook. Well, guys, I'll tell you the truth. The kids are already on Facebook and the pictures are already there. The church can only take so much liability for that. You need to teach all your kids, regardless of whether they're in church or anywhere else, about privacy on the internet. Phone numbers, home addresses, all that. I mean, keeping profiles locked down to where they're only visible by friends. I mean, there's a whole world. As our college kids are growing up and getting their first jobs, realizing that with their boss can see their Facebook, their boss can find out all the partying they did in college instead of going to class. They're learning that lesson really fast. So the security issues and the privacy issues of Facebook are kind of outside the scope of the church's website. But we do need to make sure that we acknowledge that. And with children, I mean, children's ministry, like under high school, I don't know how much of that I'd really have on the website at all. I mean, at the children's ministry is a great place for stock photos and for post photos and for pictures we've shot intentionally, knowing these kids and dad's what we call sterilized. I mean, the picture can be of two kids on the playground. This is Sarah and Mindy, and not mention last names or where they live or whose kids they are, and you're very careful with that kind of stuff. Once the kids get in high school, start producing their own content, then it's you just got to work with the kids themselves. I don't know the church can control all of that.
There are privacy settings, though, on Facebook where the kids can go in and say, I don't want my name. If somebody tags you, you can take it off. You can go on there and request that your name not be on photos and phone numbers not out there and things like that. Yeah.
What do you think is the most effective way to reach the church population? Verbal communications? Most effective way to meet. I'm saying the question is for membership as opposed to visitors. I think historically that's been, pulpit announcements has always been the prime real estate. The most expensive thing you can get in the church is a pulpit announcement. After that, I think it's the bulletin, and after that, it's probably all of the billboards and flyers and things like that. What do you think?
My first thought is pulpit announcement. I don't know why it works so well, but there's something about the senior pastor getting up there talking about whatever that just really resonates with people. Maybe it's because it doesn't happen so often, but I would say pulpit announcement for communicating to the church population.
Yeah. And if you've got questions, feel free to go ahead and post questions here, and we've got some good discussion going on here. The most effective way to communicate is going to depend upon your audience too. I know that pulpit announcements are the most popular and the most wanted, at least by the ministry leaders. I don't know that they're the most effective, but they do. I mean, if you need volunteers, if you need membership, if you need people to sign up, pulpit announcement is going to reach the most people fastest. I'll be interested as people start doing more of the social media campaigns, if those can react. Because I've seen an awful lot of stuff on Facebook where someone's had a need or a prayer request, and it can go through Facebook a lot faster than it can go through anything else. Especially, and what I like, and these are all my old sales pitches for websites back, 5 years ago when this was all on the website, but church only meets once or twice a week. And so there's an awful lot of days that we're not going to church to tomorrow or tonight. And so if a prayer request comes in on Monday, no one's going to hear about it until Wednesday or Sunday. Whereas with email and with social media and with all the web stuff, we can communicate with each other, between church services. And so, we used to build tools in the websites. You could do broadcast emails, you could do prayer requests, you could tell each other. Now it's all in the social media. And I'd be interested to see someone do a real study and say, okay, if you put out a really coordinated campaign for volunteers through social media one week and through a pulpit announcement the next week. I wonder if you really couldn't, certainly in the youth group, I don't know if the youth group even goes to main services sometimes. I mean, they live on social media, and those guys, it could be a Twitter campaign, at least this year. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and the wild thing is it just changes so fast. Then we have this tiering where every generation has their own. I get mad when people text me the information I need to keep because I don't have any way in my world of storing that. If you email it to me, I have a filing system for my emails, and I know how to store emails, I know how to find emails. And so if you email me information I need to hang on to for a long time, I can find it. If you text it to me, maybe there's a way, but my old brain just doesn't do that. If I have to write it down or email back to myself or something to take text messages. So to me, text messages are a really bad way of communicating hard data. But I know people a lot smarter and hipper than I am that live with text messages and don't like email. So each level has to do their own. How do you keep from overdoing pulpit announcements? That's a battle. How do you limit pulpit announcements? That's
above me. I don't know.
It's above your pay grade.
That's somebody else's department. But what we have started doing, what we've done in the past, and we're getting ready to kind of rebrand and relaunch, is our announcement video at our Sunday services. And we've got a pretty strict format for it. It's a minute and a half long. It's this is happening. This is what it is. Go to the website.
Yeah.
This is happening this date. Go to the website. Real quick. And so I think that'll limit the amount of pulpit announcements we do.
Yeah. And at Henderson, those 90-second videos they're real highly produced. They're real high quality, and they're real tightly scripted. And it's a large church. You get the resources. It works really well. But even in a smaller church, with webcams and flip cams and iPhones, if you just said the announcement's only 90 seconds long, someone that likes to talk on the TV is going to record these things once a week, and that's it. No last minute changes. I mean, you can do that for free. You don't have to have a whole production staff. You don't have to have all the stuff that when we think of big churches doing video because they've got the staff, they've got the talent, they've got the production gear. It does take a lot to do something highly produced, but in this world of YouTube videos and Facebook videos, you can do the old iPhone talking to yourself and be extremely effective at a fairly low cost, at zero cost. And so for those of you that are struggling, it's like, I'm a small church, we can't do that. It's like, yeah, you just haven't tried. Find a 17-year-old. They'll show you how to do it.
Yeah.
Let's see. When do you play the video announcements during your service? They kind of move around, don't they?
I think they're planning on playing it in between the worship and the sermon.
Okay. So kind of in the middle before the sermon starts. Yeah.
That's and I see that at a lot of churches in the area. So makes sense to me.
Yeah.
One person mentioned doing the pulpit announcements at the end of the service and telling them to go find information in the lobby. That way, it's fresh in their minds, and the call to action is it's easier. They're walking through the lobby anyway,
right?
And that's pretty keen. I like that. That also reminds me of a point you were talking about. People needing different types of mediums. Don't get rid of the bulletin because some people read it. You might consider keeping the same kind of policy with your call to actions. I know in our bulletin at Henderson Hills, every post says something about going to the website for more information or go to the website to register. But we also try to put in there or visit the information kiosk to register or pick up your form at such and such place. So that way you kind of give them a digital and an analog option for the call to action.
Right. And the website is becoming the place where everybody can access it. It may not be the preferred medium for everyone, but we've always picked on old people not using the website, and I've got so many stats. If you've got people in your membership that think you can't use the web for old people, email me. because I've got stats for you. I mean, there's just all kinds of places. You look at, how many seniors are on this website? How many seniors? The AARP, how many members do they have on their website? AARP is using the website, for primary communications these days in their target market. So there's very few demographics that you can find now that the web can't be reached. Maybe their favorite, but they can go there. And so if you're doing your text announcements to the youth group, they can say details on the website. If you're talking to seniors, you can say details on the website. If you're talking to middle class or middle-aged people, you can put them back to the website. And that can be your big repository for all your data. And I don't know too many groups anymore that can't fall into that. Any more questions here? How much information is too much? How much is too much information? The use of too many mediums. I managed to address that a little bit, but the strategy that I see is to keep your one primary medium being the web. That's where all the details are. You use all the other mediums to point back to that and to tag. So you've got postcards that remind you about the event, but the postcards have details on the website. You've got email blasts that remind you about that. You've got bulletins that remind you about that. You got pulpit announcements, but at the pulpit, you don't spend 7 minutes discussing the retreat. You just do a quick blurb and then mention that the details are on the website or in the lobby, in the kiosk. I mean, in the early days, there were questions about, well, what if so-and-so's can't have a website with it? Internet access, they can't print it. So, well, fine. Have a computer in the lobby, get a lobby print off for them. I mean, if you've really got someone who is so technophobic that they will not go to the website, look it up, fine. Find a 12-year-old kid, put a computer in the lobby, have that 12-year-old kid print it off to a hard copy person and hand it to them. I mean, but the website becomes a repository for all the information. And if you want an enrollment sheet, it's on the website. If you don't want to use a computer, then call the church office, we'll print one for you, we'll mail it to you.
Yeah. How much information is too much information kind of depends on where you're at. I mean, if the call to action is go to the website for details, there better be a whole bunch of details on that website. So in that case, put it all there. But if it's in the bulletin, 80 words or less is our rule for the bulletin. 80
words or less.
80 words or less.
That's a tight bulletin there.
I have seen tighter, and I like it.
I've got some Methodist friends that would be 80 pages or less, and they would be happy with that.
I saw the bulletin at the Village Church down in Dallas, and I was like, man, that is awesome. Like, really, maybe 20 words, enough for a URL at least. As far as like how many, is there such a thing as too many mediums? I don't think so. As long as you're consistent across all the mediums, I don't see that there's any harm in being out there as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't heard this argument in a long time, but I heard in the early days of working with websites and churches, I heard some, especially older people saying, we're people here, and we don't need a bunch of technology. We're like face-to-face communications. We want to be people reaching people. We don't want to have this impersonal technology. And, when you look back to the New Testament examples, I mean, Paul used every technology known to mankind. I mean, writing and sending letters via carrier was about as high-tech as it got. Paul traveled all over the place. Paul, he used everything that he had, every resource he had. And I just can't believe that if Paul wasn't alive today, he'd be massively big on Facebook. He'd be massively big on Twitter. He'd be on all the latest technologies to take anybody possible in their home technology. And he'd still be in Bible class. He'd be meeting people in person. He'd be having lunch with people. But, I just can't believe that Paul would say, I don't have a cell phone because I'm a people person. I just can't buy that. We can probably close with this one. We're coming up on time here. Last comment I see on my screen here is we find out that no matter how many places we put it, there are always people saying, I didn't know. That's beyond the scope of this program. We'll just put it that way. I don't know what we can do about that.
Technology is still working on that.
Yeah.
It might infringe on some personal rights.
Yeah, the wiring into the brain and seeing message directly to the brain is still illegal in America. So, but we have hope. So,
well, those are some great tips and information and advice. And I hope those things will, I'm sure they will help a lot of people out there. So thank you, Terrell, and thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. And thanks to all of you who participated in the live discussion. We appreciate you too. And just a reminder that Terrell will be presenting a session on this topic at MinistryCOM in Dallas. And so there's no webcast next month due to the conference. So you just need to go to the conference instead. The next webcast will be Thursday, November 18th at 1 p.m. Central Time. And you can sign up for reminders on the website. And please invite a friend and make a group effort to attend. That'd be great. And remember, MinistryCOM is coming up. Just the session we told you about that Terrell's doing is October 20th through 22nd. And again, that's in Frisco, Texas. And you can check out the details at ministrycom.org. And we'll see you in Dallas.